Hi Year 7 and welcome to your most recent history lesson. Today we're going to be looking at the Spanish Armada and we're going to carry on looking at Elizabeth I from our last lesson. So you should be able to see my screen now. It says, why did the Spanish Armada fail? That's our big question for today's lesson. In order to help us, I would note down the key words for today's lesson. So they are Catholic, Protestant. We should know those two a little bit from our previous lessons, but our other ones are invade, fleet, and Armada. And our other big understanding questions that we need to be able to answer by the end of the lesson, as well as why did the Armada fail, is why did the Spanish try to invade in the first place? And was the main reason that the Armada failed because of the weather? Our skills that we're using today are cause and consequence. Okay, so a little recap for us then. Elizabeth I was the daughter of Henry VIII, and she became queen in 1558. And it's a little bit confusing because over the previous 25 years, England had kept switching between being a Catholic country and a Protestant country. Okay, so before Henry VIII, England is completely Catholic. And then Henry VIII comes in and he changes the country from Catholic to Protestant in 1534. And that's a massive event, sets up his own church, the Church of England. And that event is known as the Reformation. And then after the death of Henry's son, Edward takes over, but he dies really young. He's only 15 when he dies. And so Mary I takes over. And Mary I, she's Catholic, and she goes back on everything that Henry VIII had done before, and she makes England Catholic again. And that's called the Counter-Reformation. Okay, she's gone back on what happened before. But Mary also doesn't last very long. So when Mary I dies, Elizabeth takes charge and she changes the country back to Protestant. You keeping up? So the good news is England is still Protestant today, which means we don't have to worry about any more switches. Okay. So although there are people of lots of different religions, there are lots of Catholics still in England, and there are people of different faiths or no faith at all, England officially is a Protestant Christian country and has been ever since Elizabeth was in charge. Now, not everybody is happy about this. So this man here, I mean, you can see from his face he looks annoyed. That is Philip II, okay? And he was in charge of one of England's biggest enemies at this time, Spain. Spain was a Catholic country and King Philip II was the King of Spain. Now, he had also been the King of England before because he was married to Mary I. When Mary I died, he stopped being King of England and he wanted to be the king again. He wanted to have a large empire and control England as well as Spain. He was also incredibly religious, so for him it was really upsetting that England wasn't a Catholic country, that it was a Protestant country. So in order to try and have control of England again, his first plan was to marry Queen Elizabeth I. And to try and become king again that way. Now that's a bit weird, isn't it? Bearing in mind that Elizabeth is the half-sister of his wife who died, Mary. But that's a bit of a strange decision to make. But he wants to find any way to get control of England and to make it Catholic again. Now, one of the things that made Philip II change his mind and decide he wasn't going to try and marry her, he had to be stronger in his actions against England, was that Elizabeth had her cousin, Mary Queen of Scots, executed. Okay, don't get confused with the two Marys. And Mary was also a Catholic, and Philip was so angry about this decision that he decided he was going to invade England. Now, invade is one of our key words. You'll have heard it before. It means when somebody from another country tries to come and take over a country. So, the way that he tried to invade was an armada, a Spanish armada of 1588. Now, an armada is a term for a sea battle where lots of ships try and take over. What the term that we're going to be using is a fleet, a set of ships. So Philip gathered a fleet of at least 130 ships and 30,000 men, and at that point it was the biggest fleet in history. Although Philip was the king and it was his plan, he didn't actually he didn't actually go to war himself. He left two dukes in charge, two important people, the Duke of Parma and the Duke of Medina. And they led two separate fleets. So it's a bit like having two separate armies. Now they were worried that this plan was rubbish and that it was a bit confusing. because you've got two different fleets and they've got to try and find a way of communicating. Now there's no mobile phones back then. There's no way of getting the messages across to each other easily. So they were worried that this plan was going to be difficult. However, Philip II didn't share any of their worries. He was incredibly confident. He said, "I do God's work." He really believed that he had God on his side and there was no way that he could lose. So, the two separate fleets, and you could probably guess what happened, they could not get messages to each other and they got separated. So this is a modern map. The two fleets were supposed to meet up here in Calais, which is in North France. And you might have been to Calais if you have ever been on a ferry over to France from England. If you've ever been on the French school trip that BBA do, we tend to land in Calais. However, the Duke of Parma's fleet went to the next town along, the next port of Dunkirk. So they're separated. And the English noticed this. They noticed that the fleet was separate. They sensed an opportunity and saw that they were unprepared. So they attacked the separate ship. And one of the ways they did this, and this is pretty amazing, was that with empty wooden ships, they set fire to them and sent them in to the Spanish fleet. So these were called fire ships. Now, these were amazing because they caused panic to the Spanish, and it also, because all of the ships would have been made from wood, it also set fire to the Spanish ships. So they caused huge havoc there. But the Spanish also caused some issues for themselves. So they weren't that prepared for the battle. Some of the cannonballs that they'd brought for the battle, they didn't fit into the cannons. So they've got all of these heavy cannons ready to fire, but they couldn't get them. They couldn't get the cannonballs into the cannons. And some of the Spanish ships, when they realised things were going wrong, and this is a nice map of the journey they would have taken. Here's Spain at the bottom, that have made their way round to France, ready to attack England. But then things start to go wrong. Here's the fire ships. But some of the ships, in order to get home, because things were going so badly wrong, and this is quite a tight bit of sea, they had to go all the way around Scotland and Ireland in order to get back to Spain. Now, the weather was absolutely terrible. And you know what England's like and what Scotland and Ireland are like. There's a lot of rain and not a lot of bad weather. So some of the ships were shipwrecked off the coast of Scotland and Ireland. And as a result, a third of the Spanish ships never came home. And 15,000 Spanish sailors were killed. So it's a huge victory for England, and it's a huge defeat for Catholic Spain, who are desperate to invade. So your first task then is you're going to read through the sources on the next slide, and you're going to put the reasons for the Armada's failure into 4 different categories. Okay, so you might want to note these down: leadership, weather, preparation, or any other factors, anything else you can think of as a reason why the Armada has failed. And what you could do as well is you could also add information that you have learned from the previous slides. If there's anything that's not on the sources, but you think that was a key reason why they lost, then you might want to put that in there as well. Now you can do this with a table, or if you're doing it on the Google Classroom slides, you could just write on the different categories onto the sources. So let's have a look. So you've got from source A to source F. I won't talk through all of them because you should be able to read through those and help you and get yourself sorted with those. But source A, I sent you to fight with men and not the weather, and that's from Philip II, the actual King of Spain, in 1588. So it's not that difficult to work out what category that could go into. He's saying that I prepared you to fight with Englishmen, but I didn't prepare you for the weather. Okay, so if we just flick back, it's clearly the weather is a key one, but I would also say it probably affects both leadership, because it's a mistake from Philip II for not preparing, and preparation. So you could probably put all 3 in there when you complete that work. Any words that we're not sure of, looking at here, I would say this word here, artillery, just means what they're firing, so their use of weapons. That's what artillery means. Okay, so have a look through those and put them into the different categories. Your task 2 is to answer this question. It's a really brief paragraph in your book, and you've got sentence starters to help you. You don't have to use these sentence starters, by the way. If you think I can do this without them, then that's absolutely fine. So your question is, the main reason the Spanish Armada was defeated was the weather. Do you agree? So use the sentence starters below to help you if you want to. I agree/disagree that the Armada lost because of the weather. Make a decision. If you disagree, you might say something like, Although the weather played a part, I think the biggest problem was that the Spanish were not prepared. Because they could have been prepared for bad weather. They're attacking England. They're trying to invade England. Of course the weather's going to be bad. So you might want to say something like that. Give some examples from your sources. For example, flip back, Philip II says, I sent you to fight with men and not the weather. And then explain why you think your reason is more important than some of the others. Explain why you think weather was more important than another factor. For instance, for your other ones here, other factors, you could talk about England's skill. Like this one here says the use of artillery. That's nothing to do with the Spanish being rubbish. That's to do with the English being skillful and well prepared for the Armada. So get that to us, and you can hand that in on Google Classroom before Friday, please. Your deadline's Friday at 12 o'clock. If you've got any questions or not sure on any of your tasks, please do message us on Google Classroom, or you can email your teacher. And my email address is at the bottom there. Best of luck with it. We look forward to marking your work, and we look forward to seeing you soon in the very near future. Good luck.